The Courtroom, Humiliation that shattered a billionaire's empire. He branded her worthless. He paraded before the judge claiming she was nothing more than a charity project he'd rescued from a roadside diner. Matthew Blackwood, Silicon Valley's crowned tech emperor, lounged in that Manhattan courtroom flanked by his squadron of ruthless attorneys, smirking as they catalogued his spouse's supposed empty bank accounts. Spectators whispered and chuckled. Journalists frantically documented each degrading remark. Then everything changed when Judge Steinberg unsealed the confidential file. Color drained from his features. His gaze shifted between the visibly shaken woman and her pompous husband before he spoke her authentic family name into the microphone. Instantly, the ridicule evaporated. The legal team went rigid. And Matthew understood he hadn't merely lost a court battle, he'd just provoked the wrath of America's most influential dynasty. His entire empire was about to crumble. The luxury apartment towering above Central Park reeked of expensive cologne and broken promises. Everything in Matthew Blackwood's world carried a price tag, particularly his relationships. Elena perched uncomfortably on the edge of an extravagant Italian sofa, fingers nervously intertwined. Her outfit consisted of a faded gray sweater from a discount retailer she'd purchased years earlier, paired with worn denim that had seen better days. Surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Central Park's sprawling greenery and contemporary masterpieces valued at small fortunes, she appeared completely out of place. Matthew certainly regarded her that way now. "Don't complicate this, Elena," Matthew stated without bothering to glance up from his smartphone. He stood beside the premium bar, pouring himself rare bourbon worth thousands per bottle. At 34, he possessed the kind of calculated attractiveness that graced business magazine covers and luxury fashion spreads. "Sign these documents, accept the $50,000, and return to whatever small town spawned you. Nebraska, Kansas." "Connecticut, actually," she responded quietly. He gestured dismissively. "Irrelevant. Listen, my legal team, Harrison and Associates, they'll demolish you if you attempt resistance. I'm showing mercy here. You were serving tables when we met. I provided 5 years of opulence. You inhabited my residence, consumed my groceries, dressed in garments I financed. Think of this 50 grand as a termination bonus." Elena, though she'd always preferred her complete name, examined the paperwork scattered across the glass table. The documents represented a vicious enforcement of prenuptial terms, accompanied by divorce filings claiming fundamental incompatibility while portraying her as a financial parasite. "I don't want your money, Matthew," she declared, her voice maintaining composure despite trembling hands. "I simply need to understand why. 7 days ago we discussed our anniversary vacation to Italy. Today you're evicting me." Matthew finally faced her directly. He sampled the bourbon, his expression devoid of warmth. "Last week I was finalizing the acquisition with Constellation Technologies. I required the appearance of domestic stability. That transaction concluded. I no longer need the facade." The calculated cruelty stole her breath. A facade. She'd nursed him through serious illness. She'd assisted organizing presentations during his startup's infancy when resources were scarce. She'd prepared meals for potential investors when professional catering wasn't financially feasible. "You sliced vegetables, Elena. Don't pretend you developed the technology," he sneered. "Honestly, I've evolved beyond you. I require someone matching my brand image, someone with legitimate credentials and sophistication, not a restaurant server who lucked into privilege." The elevator announced an arrival, revealing a statuesque blonde wearing crimson designer clothing worth more than Elena's first vehicle. This was Monica, Matthew's vice president of marketing. Monica completely ignored Elena's presence. She approached Matthew directly, claimed his glass, and took a sip. "Is she still occupying space? The moving crew is downstairs, Matthew. We have the Metropolitan Museum Gala tonight. She needs to be gone." Elena rose deliberately. The initial shock was subsiding, replaced by a profound ache throughout her chest. Yet beneath that pain, something else awakened, a distant memory, a promise made to her grandmother long ago. "Never reveal your wounds, little one. You carry strength they cannot comprehend." "You're committing a terrible error, Matthew," Elena stated calmly. Matthew's laughter echoed genuine amusement. He glanced toward Monica. "Did you catch that? She believes I'm making mistakes. Sweetheart, my only mistake involved not securing more aggressive legal protection initially. Now leave, or security will physically remove you." Elena studied him one final time. She didn't scream or shed tears. She simply retrieved from her purse the penthouse access card and placed it deliberately on the glass surface. The sound echoed sharply. "I'll see you in court," she promised. "Go ahead and try," Matthew smirked. "Hope you can afford public legal representation." She walked toward the elevator, her casual footwear silent against polished marble. As the doors sealed shut, she observed Matthew and Monica already laughing, erasing her existence. They possessed no knowledge. How could they possibly understand? Throughout 5 years, Elena had been extraordinarily careful. She'd buried her background so thoroughly she'd nearly forgotten it herself. She desperately wanted acceptance for her authentic self, not the crushing golden burden of her lineage. Stepping onto Manhattan's bustling sidewalk, she extracted her aging phone. She dialed digits she hadn't used in 7 years. After 2 rings, a distinguished voice answered. "Hello?" "Uncle Richard," Elena said, her voice finally breaking. "It's me. It's Victoria." Heavy silence filled the connection. Then the voice softened considerably. "Victoria, dear God, we didn't know your location. Is everything acceptable?" "No," she responded, gazing upward at the towering structure where her husband currently celebrated her departure. "I need the family attorneys. I need the firm." "Consider it arranged," Richard declared, his tone hardening to steel. "Welcome back to reality, Victoria." 3 weeks later, the preliminary hearing convened at New York's Civil Court in Lower Manhattan. Matthew arrived via luxury vehicle, emerging with the swagger of someone who owned the entire city. His legal battalion, Harrison and Associates, flanked him completely. These were New York's most ruthless legal mercenaries, specialists charging astronomical hourly rates who excelled at destroying opposition. Harrison, the primary attorney, possessed bulldog features and wore suits costing more than average monthly salaries. "This will conclude quickly, Matthew," Harrison assured him while they climbed courthouse steps, ignoring assembled media. "She hasn't submitted any response documentation. No attorney has contacted our office. She'll probably appear with minimal legal aid and plead for settlement terms. We'll propose $20,000. Accept or face consequences." "Make it 10, Matthew adjusted his expensive timepiece. "She needs education regarding her proper place." Inside the courtroom, stale air hung heavily. Judge Harrison Steinberg presided, known throughout divorce proceedings as the executioner due to his absolute intolerance for theatrical performances. He represented old-school New York authority with thick spectacles and a permanent scowl. Matthew occupied the plaintiff's table, casually scrolling his phone. Monica sat in the gallery behind him, wearing oversized sunglasses, projecting boredom. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Steinberg assumed the bench, shuffling through documents with visible irritation. "All right. Blackwood versus Blackwood. Let's expedite this. Counsel for plaintiff?" "Present, Your Honor. Arthur Harrison, representing Mr. Matthew Blackwood," Harrison boomed, standing prominently. "And for the defendant?" The judge examined the vacant opposing table. The rear courtroom doors opened dramatically. What entered wasn't any public defender. First came a young associate carrying multiple briefcases. then another assistant, followed by a distinguished silver-haired gentleman in an impeccable navy suit that whispered of generational wealth and quiet authority. He carried a cane, not from necessity but as refined accessory. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Even the court reporter ceased typing. Harrison's jaw dropped noticeably. He nudged Matthew urgently. That's Richard Montgomery." Matthew frowned. "Who?" "Richard Montgomery," Harrison hissed. "He's senior partner at Montgomery, Stone and Whitmore. They don't handle divorces. They manage international corporate mergers, sovereign debt negotiations, and royal estates." "Why is he here?" Elena entered behind Richard. She'd abandoned the gray sweater. Now she wore an immaculate cream pantsuit, perfectly tailored. Her hair, typically hastily tied back, now cascaded in sleek professional waves. She wore minimal jewelry, only a small vintage pin on her lapel. She didn't acknowledge Matthew. She proceeded to the defendant's table and sat. Richard Montgomery seated himself beside her, placing one thin folder on the desk. "Your Honor," Richard stated. His voice wasn't loud, yet it commanded the entire room effortlessly. "Richard Montgomery, representing the defendant." Judge Steinberg peered over his spectacles, eyebrows lifting. "Mr. Montgomery, I haven't encountered you in family court since the Vandermeer dissolution in '98. "I make exceptions for extraordinary circumstances, Your Honor," Richard replied with courteous acknowledgement. Matthew leaned toward Harrison. "I don't care about his reputation. Destroy him. She possesses no resources to retain him. This is obviously a bluff." Harrison stood, fastening his jacket button. He decided on immediate aggressive offense. "Your Honor," Harrison began using his most condescending tone, "while we acknowledge Mr. Montgomery's presence, this represents a straightforward case. My client, Mr. Blackwood, is a self-made billionaire entrepreneur. The defendant is a woman of extremely modest background, a former food service worker with absolutely zero personal assets. We possess a prenuptial agreement executed 5 years ago explicitly stating she departs with exactly what she contributed. Nothing." He turned toward Elena with a contemptuous expression. "We're prepared to offer a nominal settlement avoiding unnecessary court time. But frankly, Mrs. Blackwood is prolonging proceedings attempting to extract money from a man whose success she contributed nothing toward." Matthew smirked. That was the established narrative. The visionary genius and the opportunistic leech. Richard Montgomery didn't immediately stand. He waited for Harrison's voice echo to completely fade. Then he slowly rose. "Your Honor," Richard stated, "the plaintiff claims my client possesses zero assets. He claims she represents a parasite. He claims the prenuptial agreement holds validity." Richard smiled. It wasn't pleasant. "We aren't contesting the divorce itself. My client desires separation from Mr. Blackwood equally. However, we are contesting asset distribution, specifically ownership of Constellation Technologies and the Texas property upon which Mr. Blackwood's manufacturing facility operates." Matthew laughed audibly. "She's delusional. I built Constellation and I purchased that property." Judge Steinberg struck his gavel. "Mr. Blackwood, silence." Richard continued unfazed. "Mr. Blackwood believes he acquired the Texas land 4 years ago from an entity called Horizon Holdings. He also believes his initial capital investment, $2 million, originated from an investment group named Sterling Ventures, correct?" "So what?" Matthew shouted, ignoring his attorney's restraining hand. "Those are legitimate entities." "Indeed they are," Richard agreed. "And had Mr. Harrison performed adequate due diligence instead of merely calculating billable hours, he would have investigated who actually owns Horizon Holdings and controls Sterling Ventures." Richard opened the thin folder. "My client has existed as Elena Blackwood for 5 years. She's lived humbly. She's chopped vegetables. She's allowed her husband to believe he was the provider. But her name, Your Honor, is not simply Elena. The tension became suffocating, but Matthew remained dismissive. He represented 21st century new money, algorithms, and cryptocurrency. He didn't fear elderly men in expensive suits. "This is absurd," Matthew whispered loudly to Harrison. "It's a stalling tactic. She's nobody. I met her at a New Jersey diner. She was wearing a ketchup-stained apron." Harrison stood, face reddening. "Your Honor, this represents pure theatrics. Unless Mr. Montgomery can prove the defendant possesses any claim to these assets, we move for immediate judgment based on the prenuptial agreement." "Oh, we can absolutely prove it," Richard stated quietly. "But first I'd like to address the mockery my client endured. In the affidavit filed by Mr. Blackwood, he states, the wife is uneducated, lacks business understanding, and is essentially dependent." Richard lifted a document from the evidence pile. "Mr. Blackwood, did you or did you not force my client to sleep in the guest quarters for the past 6 months because you claimed she didn't fit your new brand image aesthetic?" Matthew rolled his eyes. "She dresses like someone from a thrift store. I operate a billion-dollar technology firm. Image is critical." "And did you or did you not tell your mistress, Ms. Monica Davis, currently sitting in the gallery, that your wife was too incompetent to understand basic financial instruments?" Monica shifted uncomfortably as heads turned toward her. "That was a private conversation," Matthew snapped. "And it's accurate. She never spent money because she was terrified of it. Classic poverty mentality." "Poverty mentality," Richard repeated, savoring the words. "Fascinating." He turned toward the judge. "Your Honor, the plaintiff's entire case rests on the premise that he represents financial superiority, that he's the industry titan and she's the beggar. This arrogance brought us here. Because Mr. Blackwood was so convinced of his own brilliance, he never inquired about his wife's family. He never questioned why she never applied for a passport. He never wondered why she insisted on paying for their first date with cash." "Because she was broke," Matthew yelled. "No." Elena spoke for the first time. Her voice rang clear and commanding. She stood. Matthew looked at her, truly looked at her. Something had transformed in her eyes. The submissiveness had vanished. In its place was cold, unyielding determination that unsettlingly reminded him of rival corporate CEOs. "I paid cash, Matthew," she stated, meeting his gaze directly. "Because if I'd used my card, the transaction would have been flagged by the family office, and my security detail would have arrived at that diner within 10 minutes. I was attempting a normal existence. I was trying to escape the name." "What name?" Matthew scoffed. "Johnson? Williams?" Judge Steinberg was reading the document Richard had provided. His eyes moved rapidly. He stopped. He looked up. He removed his glasses, cleaned them methodically, then replaced them. "Mr. Harrison," the judge said, his voice unusually subdued, "have you examined the defendant's birth certificate?" "We have a standard copy of her marriage license," Harrison replied, suddenly uncertain. "That's insufficient." Judge Steinberg's voice carried an edge now. "Mr. Montgomery, please present the sealed birth record to opposing counsel." Richard's associate handed Harrison a document. Harrison read it. His face transformed from confident red to ashen white. He read it again. This can't be accurate," Harrison stammered. "It's certified by the State of Connecticut Bureau of Vital Records," Richard stated calmly. "Authenticated by federal documentation. Cross-referenced with international records." "What is it?" Matthew demanded, snatching the paper from Harrison's trembling hands. He read the name. Victoria Eleanor Whitmore Ashford. The courtroom fell into absolute silence. Matthew's hands began shaking. "Whitmore? As in the Whitmore banking dynasty," Richard confirmed. "As in Whitmore Financial Holdings, which controls approximately $400 billion in assets globally. As in the family that has financed every major American infrastructure project since the railroad expansion." That Whitmore. Ashford? As in Ashford Land Trust, Richard continued, which owns approximately 2 million acres across 17 states, including, and this is particularly relevant, the exact parcel of land in Texas that Mr. Blackwood believes he purchased from Horizon Holdings. Matthew felt his legs weaken. That's impossible. I bought that land. I have the deed. You have a deed, Richard corrected. A lease agreement disguised as a purchase. Horizon Holdings is a subsidiary of Ashford Land Trust. My client didn't want you to know who she was, so the family structured it as a sale. But the fine print, which your attorneys apparently didn't read, clearly states the land reverts to Ashford Trust upon dissolution of the marriage. Harrison was frantically flipping through his copy of the land purchase agreement. His face grew paler with each page. And Sterling Ventures? Richard continued. That's a Whitmore family investment vehicle. The $2 million Mr. Blackwood believes he secured from anonymous investors? That was my client's money. Her inheritance. She funded his entire startup because she believed in him. Elena stood fully now. She walked to the center of the courtroom. I loved you, Matthew, she said quietly. I genuinely loved you. I didn't want you to know who I was because every relationship I'd ever had dissolved the moment people discovered my family name. They either wanted my money or were intimidated by it. I worked at that diner because I wanted authenticity. I wanted someone to love me for myself, and I thought you did. For 5 years, I convinced myself you did. But you didn't love me. You loved the idea of me as your inferior, someone you could control and belittle, someone who made you feel powerful. Tears streamed down her face now, but her voice remained steady. So yes, Matthew, you're right about one thing. I do lack business acumen. Because if I had any, I would never have invested $2 million in a man who couldn't see past his own reflection. Judge Steinberg cleared his throat. Mr. Harrison, I'm going to ask you directly. Did you perform adequate background investigation on the defendant? Harrison couldn't speak. He simply shook his head. Did you verify the source of your client's startup capital? Another head shake. Did you investigate the ownership structure of the Texas property? Silence. Then I suggest you advise your client that this case is far from simple. Matthew finally found his voice. She signed a prenup. She agreed to leave with nothing. She signed a prenuptial agreement as Elena Blackwood, Richard stated. A legal identity she assumed specifically for the marriage. However, Victoria Whitmore Ashford never ceded her family assets, her trust funds, or her property rights. 2 separate legal entities, Your Honor. Furthermore, Richard continued, pulling out another document, we have documentation provi